guys, today I'm going to be analysing chapters 17 to 20 of Asem. So now Paul has left the house, we think maybe he has gone into town, and Barry's is at home alone. Barry sees that on the coffee table there are a bunch of cards left out, and these are not credit cards, they are handwritten cards that you'd write someone for their birthday or for Christmas. So while Paul is out, Philly comes by the house. And Barry asks him about the dacha, or the weed, because remember, Philly brought back Barry's clothes, and they smelt of weed. So now Barry asks him about it, and Philly explains that his dad is the one who smokes. Later on, they decide to go on a walk and take Yona with, and end up swimming in a tidal pool. Paul comes home and he thinks that somebody has stolen his money. He says that he left his money on top of the table as a trap, because obviously his money was stolen before and he is trying to find the culprit. He thought it was Philly before, and now this makes it look like it was Philly again, because Philly was the one by the house. But Barry actually takes the blame for him because Philly is his friend and he doesn't want him to get into trouble. And Paul had threatened to shoot Philly. So Barry says that he stole the money, and Paul he assumes that Barry has stolen the money from Paul in order to buy weed from Philly, because Paul is aware that Philly's family does smoke weed. Next, Barry asks Paul about all the cards that are left on the coffee table. And Paul says that now he is going to make the time to reply to all the letters that Barry had written him in the past. So these were letters that Barry had written Paul when he was in prison, or even when he was out of prison, for birthdays and for Christmas, maybe Father's Day. And Paul never replied to them because obviously he didn't have a relationship with Barry's. But now he is trying to write their relationship, and he's going to start doing that by replying to all the letters that Barry's wrote him in the past. Olga then invites Barry to go on a walk with her on the St. Francis Cape. Steph and Paul are really busy with the generator and trying to get it to work, so they don't notice Olga and Barry's missing. While they're on their walk, Olga takes her clothes off and asks Barry to do the same. Olga asks Barry to undo her bikini at the back because she says that she doesn't want to have any tan lines. After that, she begins to kiss him and asks why he is so sad. Barry ends up telling her about the dead verkeersman, the dead man who Theo rode over, and how bad he feels about what happened, and the fact that he has a pregnant wife, and now the wife and the newborn baby will not know their dad. Barry says that he is asking for forgiveness, and he doesn't necessarily know from who, but he is trying to find forgiveness for himself. Next, Steph asks where he and Olga were, and they explain that they were just taking Yona on a walk. Barry goes into the workroom where they paint and do their sculptures, and he begins to make a sculpture. While he is doing that, Olga walks in and she puts his hand on her chest and says that he needs to make the sculpture's chest a lot bigger like hers. But Steph knows that she is gone and causing trouble, so he calls her and tells her that she needs to come sit with the bigger people or the older people. Now we are on chapter 18, and it is the day before Christmas. Barry says that he is going to buy Paul a bottle of brandy if Paul will buy him some weed, because Barry is feeling very lonely and sad because of the dead man, and he's feeling very bad about what happened. So he thinks that weed is the only thing that can make him feel better, but Paul says no. Paul explains that he is planning on chasing the Boysons away from his land, because as of now the Boysons are just living in a sort of shack or like a structure on his piece of land. They don't actually own any land or have any residence there. And Paul thinks that they are stealing his money because he heard that Philly was there when his money was stolen off of the table. So Paul shoots his gun in the air in order to warn the family that they are no longer welcome on his land and that they need to leave. He says that they need to leave that day before Christmas. So Carl is Philly's dad, and they are Rastafarians with a goatee. He has a yellow and red hat on, and he has long locks. So Carl says that they don't bother anybody, so he doesn't understand why they must leave. Barry says that Steph is also a plucky. So a plucky is a person who basically lives on your land even though they don't own any residence there. And he asks Paul, why can Steph live on your land and not the Boysons? But Paul says that Steph is like a brother to him. And Barry actually stands up for Philly here and says that Philly is like a brother to him. So it is the same thing. And he would appreciate if Paul would let Philly stay for him because he let Steph stay for himself. So Paul agrees and he says, okay, that's fine. They can stay until the new year. He doesn't want to chase them out before Christmas. Paul leaves and goes back to the house, but Barry stays and he looks at the house that the Boysons live in. And obviously it's not very fancy. It looks more like a shack and it doesn't have any doors or windows or any proper infrastructure. Carl sees him and he really appreciates that he stood up for Philly and his family and invites him in for some fish and goat's milk, almost like a Christmas Eve dinner. So in the house, Barry looks at himself in the bathroom mirror. And here he realizes that he actually doesn't look like Paul at all. They have different color eyes and hair, and they don't have the same facial features. And this is very important to remember. Next, Barry calls his mother and he gets her voicemail, which makes him very worried because he was obviously very worried about Butcher and him getting to her, and this just heightens his fears that maybe something has happened to her already. Then he calls the vet, and Dr. Hakkinen says that Jona has von Willebrand ziekte, so that's von Willebrand disease. And this is a kind of sickness that dogs can get, which has to do with blood clotting. So their blood does not clot normally, which means that if they start to bleed, they won't stop, or they won't stop easily, and they can actually just bleed out. This is why he needs to be very careful with Jona. She also warns him that the medical bills will be very expensive, but if he wants to keep him alive, then he will be able to live a normal life. Now we are on chapter 19, and it is Christmas Day, or Christmas morning. So Barry decides that he's going to go visit Olga, and he wants to first check if Steph is out the house so he can get her alone. He climbs onto the hill and he sees that Steph is by the rocks with his arrow, or it's something that like they kill fish with. It's called a pijlgeweer. So just remember that word. And obviously that means he's not at the house, but he could see that the chimney has got smoke coming out of it, which means that somebody definitely has to be home, and that's probably Olga. So he decides he's going to go see her, and he is with Philly at the moment. So Philly warns him that it is not a good idea to go to the house. Obviously because he knows that Steph is very dangerous and he doesn't want Barry to get into any trouble. But Barry does not listen to him. Olga lets Barry in the house and she begins to tell him about her plan to leave Steph. Olga opens up to him and says that she was a weeskind, which is an orphan, and that when she was growing up in Namibia, she grew up as an orphan and ran away from that orphanage. She managed to run away because she had a friend in Joburg who helped her out with some money, and this allowed her to leave Namibia and not go back because she didn't need to depend on them for any resources or money. So now she says that she knows Butcher and he is going to help her with cards and passports and money in order to let her leave Steph. But Barry warns her about Butcher and says that he is a very dangerous man and that she should rather go live with him and Paul. But she says no, she wants to run away and she trusts Butcher and that Barry must actually come with her. Olga also says that she is going to give Barry his Christmas gift, but what she actually means by this is that she is going to have sex with him. But at this point, they hear Steph in his beach buggy stop outside, so Barry rushes to creep under the bed. Steph knows that Barry is there though because Jona is outside, and there is no other reason for Jona to be there other than if Barry is around. So Steph calls out that his mom is severely assaulted and she's fighting for her life in hospital now. He explains that when Paul was in town at church that morning, Willie Schultz, who is the policeman, he told Paul about what happened to Vera. At this point, Nico begins to call Barry's. Obviously, his phone rings out loud and Steph can hear it from under the bed, so he knows that Barry's is there, and he pulls Barry's out by his legs. He is so angry that he tries to shoot Yona, but he ends up missing. And he also tells Barry's that Paul is not actually his biological father, and that when Vera was younger, a man had raped her, and that's why she got pregnant with him. Steph also blames Barry's about everything. He says that his friendship with Paul is not the same since he arrived, and that all that he has brought is trouble into their lives. Philly also ends up saving Yona's life because Steph was trying to shoot him with the arrow. So while he was distracted, Philly took the arrow and he threw it high in the air so that it landed on the roof, and so that Steph could not get to it. When this happened, the two boys ran away quickly. Paul gets very angry with Steph because he heard what he said, and he was so mad that Steph told Barry's about this fact about his father, and that Paul was not actually his father before he could tell Barry's the truth. Paul was waiting to build trust with Barry's before he told him this truth. When Barry's is safe, he answers Niku's call, and she explains to him that the man who assaulted Vera was trying to steal her bag and her cell phone, so it looked like a robbery. This doesn't mean it actually was a robbery. Maybe this person just tried to make it look like that. And that is exactly what Barry's thinks, that Butcher was trying to send a message to Barry's that he must be careful and not expose him, but he just made it look like a robbery so that he didn't get caught. And the assault was that he stabbed her in the neck with a knife. Barry's begins to pack his bags by the house. Paul comes to talk to him, and he says that he is so sorry that Barry's had to find out that way about his mother and that he was not actually his biological father. Paul explains to him that he found out that Vera was raped when Barry's was 5 years old, so he did not know before, and it was also a surprise to him. Vera and Paul also went to marriage counseling in order to try and work through their problems, but what Paul really wanted was for Vera to press charges against that man, but Vera refused. So Paul took it into his own hands. He got a private investigator to try find out who raped Vera, since she wouldn't talk about it or admit who it was, because she obviously knew Paul was going to try press charges against him. So when Paul found out who the man was, he decided he wanted to confront him. So him and Steph went to the bar where they knew he was going to be one night, and they confronted him about what happened to Vera. And he was saying awful things about her, which made Paul very angry. So Paul hit him and actually caused a brain bleeding in his head, or in his brain. And the man did not survive this hit. This was the reason why Paul went to jail, because he had killed a man even though it was an accident. And that's obviously why he didn't go to jail for that long. If he'd actually killed him intentionally, then I think he would have gone to jail a lot longer. And Paul also explains that the reason why he didn't reach out to Barry's and why he just left was because he actually killed Barry's father. Even though he was a rapist, he still killed his father, and he felt very bad about that. A little bit later, Yona's owners came to collect him. Philly, being the good friend that he was, offered to hide Yona until they are gone, but Barry says that it was the right thing to do to give him back to his owners, and that he cannot look after him anymore because he's going back to Joburg the next day. But obviously Philly was just trying to be a good friend because he knew that Yona meant a lot to Barry's. And Yona's owners, they are the Dutoy family, and they own a white Pajero.